There's a scene in Spirited Away that stuck with me. Chihiro and her parents stumbled across an abandoned town. The parents went and explored on their own. They came across a night market and found fresh, steamy food. And they called out. Nobody answers, and they just sit down and eat. They probably figure they can sort things out later. One easy, comfortable choice at a time. By the time Chihiro realizes something is wrong, the parents have already turned into pigs, lost the ability to speak, leave, or fight back. That scene stuck with me because I watched it during a period of my life when comfort had become its own kind of trap. I ignored the soft voice inside me, but the scene awakened something in me. For anyone who has ever felt or still feels stuck, you'll understand that trap because the trap never reveals itself. It often just feels like a free, delicious meal. And that's what this episode is about. Because we live in a world that has never been more comfortable. And comfort, it turns out, has a price. We pay it slowly, quietly, one easy choice at a time. Welcome to Progress Reimagined. I'm Kathleen Chu. This show explores innovative ideas, technologies, and economic models that put humanity and our planet first. Today is a solo episode, a personal reflection on something I think matters deeply. And I want to start with a question that sits at the heart of everything we discuss here. What does real progress actually look like? Because a very dangerous kind of progress is the kind we don't question. And on the rare occasions when we do, the questions tends to be, can we? When it should be, should we? Have you read Brave New World? It's about a society where people are conditioned not to feel pain, conditioned not to feel at all. And those who are still willing to feel, to struggle, to want something real, they're seen as barbaric. And whenever life gets uncomfortable, whenever something real tries to break through, grief, longing, doubt, they take a pill called soma. Instant relief, no pain, no conflict, no difficult feelings. But also, it means a life without any real connection or struggle. A life that has no purpose, no meaning. Huxley wrote this in 1931 as a warning, and I keep coming back to it because it feels less like fiction every year. Most people, when they think about dystopia, they think about 1984. Big Brother, surveillance, boot on your throat, and that fear is real. But Huxley imagines something different. Not a world that controls you through fear. A world that controls you with comfort. You don't have to feel anything difficult. Numbing becomes the way. And gradually you spend more time numbing yourself. Not feeling, not thinking deeply. I think that's far more relevant to the world we are living in. Whether it's binge watching, doom scrolling, non-stop gaming, modern-day soma is everywhere. And gradually you go willingly, unknowingly. And that's exactly what makes it so hard to see and so hard to escape. There's a saying you probably heard, especially if you work in tech. Technology is neutral. Like fire, it can create or destroy. It's all in how we use it. It sounds reasonable, and it gets repeated so often that it starts to feel true. But Neil Postman, in his book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, published in 1984, pushed back on this. He argued that technology is never neutral, and that some technologies carry hidden costs. The printing press liberated us, but not every technology moves us in that direction. Social media captures our attention, and the hidden cost is that whether we realize it or not, everything eventually has to compete for it. And the technology that concerned Postman most back then was television. He believed that once television became the dominant way people experienced the world, it quietly changed everything it touched. Now, to be fair, television also did something remarkable. It brought the world into people's living room. It connected communities. It documented history in real time. It moved people in ways print never could. And Postman's point wasn't that it was all bad, but his concern was that television was built for entertainment. And once it became the lens through which people experienced everything else, news, politics, education, those things had to become entertaining too. The question is, what do we lose when everything becomes a show? Take the news. A broadcast has limited time to cover everything happening in the world that day. So every story gets compressed into a headline, a dramatic image, and a brief summary. You watch it and feel informed, but you've really just received a highlight reel of the world's most urgent problems with no time to understand any of them. Take politics. Before television, debates were long. The Lincoln-Douglas debates in 1858 ran 3 hours each. People stood in a field for 3 hours to listen to two men argue about ideas. They expected depth. They came for it. But television needs something different. Fast, watchable, dramatic. So debates became about moments. Who looked more confident? Who landed the better one-liner? The best debater and the best thinker stopped being the same person. Postman's argument wasn't that television destroyed these things. It quietly transformed them, shaped them to fit the medium. And we barely notice it happening. And if Postman had concerns about television, a technology that sat in your living room for entertainment, I keep wondering what he would make of a device that never leaves your hand. So let's look at what that device actually does to us. Take social media. It captures our attention through engagement. The thing is, we often conflate engagement with connection. We use social media to feel connected with friends and family. But deep inside, we know true connection requires presence, vulnerability, and time. Engagement just requires a reaction, a like, a share, perhaps an outrage. And the algorithm rewards whichever one keeps us scrolling the longest. We put the phone down feeling like we participated in the world. But have we actually thought about any of it long enough to warrant an action? Take streaming services. Every detail is built around keeping us watching. The autoplay, the cliffhanger, the next episode loading before we've decided if we even want it. There's no natural stopping point, and sometimes there's a sudden jolt. A violent scene, an unexpected sexual moment that feels unnecessary to the story but keeps our nervous system alert and engaged. And the hidden cost isn't the hours we spend, because that's obvious. It is what happens to our tolerance for anything slow, difficult, or unrewarding. The kind of tolerance we need to read a hard book, or sit with a difficult idea, or have a conversation that doesn't resolve quickly or neatly. And then there's AI, which is complicated. It assists us, and it does so remarkably well. But assistance can quietly become replacement. And the danger isn't that AI thinks for us. It's that we stop trusting ourselves and fail to notice when we stop thinking. I noticed this with something as simple as Grammarly. I used it to check my grammar, and over time, I realized I no longer felt sure about my own writing without it. That quiet loss of confidence, I hadn't even noticed it happening. So I stopped using it for a while, and slowly that confidence came back. I still use it from time to time, but I no longer solely rely on it. That's what assistance becoming replacement feels like. Not dramatic, just quiet and gradual. And here's the thing. Social media, streaming services, AI, none of these technologies set out to harm us. They're just doing what they were built to do. But there is a cost. It costs us more than we realize. On the surface, it looks like distraction. Too much screen time, shorter attention spans. We've all heard that conversation. But I think it goes deeper than that. When we remove the thinking component from public discussions and debates, when performance becomes more valuable than argument and looking convincing matters more than being right, what we are left with is theatrical acting. And theatrical acting rewards conviction over curiosity. In other words, it's more important to seem sure than to actually think. And when that becomes the standard, we stop rewarding people who question. We start rewarding people who have conviction, whether that means blind conviction or not. And what happens when this becomes a wider societal or global phenomenon? Postman observed that showing someone thinking on television isn't entertaining. So the act of thinking itself becomes something to avoid. And we see this pattern everywhere now. Whether we trust someone often depends on their confidence rather than the actual content of what they're saying. And when we judge people by how certain they sound, rather than how deeply they think, thinking becomes optional, extra, unnecessary. When thinking becomes optional, facts become debatable, and truth becomes a choice, and that is the problem. We can see this in the way public discourse has changed, in the way people struggle to distinguish between opinion and facts, in the way truth has become something you choose to believe rather than something you try to find. I experienced this recently. I was in a taxi in Montreal, and Canadians are some of the friendliest people I've encountered. The driver was eloquent, knowledgeable, talking through the history of the city like a professor. The conversation was very pleasant, and then it turned to politics and something shifted. He made a claim about the American economy and ended it with, "And that is a fact." But it wasn't a fact, it was an opinion stated with absolute certainty. When I gently offered a different perspective, that was enough. He got worked up. Not angry exactly, just this urgent need to make things clear. And he times his words so carefully that I couldn't get a word in until I got off. That's what conviction without curiosity looks like up close. No ill meaning, just not open to other perspectives. So where do we go from here? Postman believed the answer was education. Not just learning facts, but learning how to think, how to question, how to engage honestly with ideas that challenge us. And I think he was right. But I would add something alongside it that feels more immediate and more personal. Train your attention not as a discipline or a productivity hack, just as something worth protecting. We all have the capacity for depth, and the question is whether we give ourselves the space for it. For me, that looks like audiobooks and art, and specifically sashiko, a Japanese embroidery craft where you follow a pattern stitch by stitch slowly. There's something about working with your hands while listening to a book that feels amazingly energizing. And it feels like a form of a resistance. And I think that's exactly what it is. Some people say art is resistance. Maybe this is what they mean. Creating something with your full attention, outside of any feed or algorithm, that exists simply because you made it. And it doesn't have to be that. It could be anything analog. A walk without your phone, cooking something from scratch, sitting quietly, even briefly, without feeling the silence. Policy and regulation will need to play a role, but we don't have to wait for that. Change starts with us, with the small daily choices about where we direct our attention and how we engage with ideas. The point isn't to reject technology. It's to make sure we're still the ones deciding what deserves our attention, and that we still have the capacity to think clearly. And that capacity, that ability to feel, to think, to struggle towards something real, is exactly what Huxley's world had lost. So let's come back to where we started. Huxley wrote a world where nobody was suffering. Nobody was oppressed. Nobody was even unhappy. No villain, no war, no poverty, just comfort. And yet something about that world stays with you long after you finish the last page. And you haven't read it yet. Small spoiler ahead. In that world, the things that make us human, the grief, the longing, the restlessness, the hunger for something real and true and meaningful, had all been quietly smoothed away, not taken by force, not legislated out of existence, just made unnecessary. There was Soma for that. John the Savage, the one character who refuses, doesn't get imprisoned. He doesn't get punished. The system doesn't even bother. It simply has no place for someone who still wants to feel things, who still believes that suffering can mean something. And in the end, that loneliness of being fully human in a world that has moved past humanity is what pushes him to the edge. I finished that book and felt as if my heart was on the floor, grieving the loss of John the Savage, so lost and lonely in a world that doesn't understand him. What was most vivid to me is the crowd that watches John struggle and treats it as entertainment. They're not cruel, they're not evil, they just don't have the capacity for anything deeper anymore. That capacity was never taken from them. They just never needed it. And Huxley wasn't the only one who saw this. Miyazaki did too. Remember Chihiro's parents, the empty town, the food, one comfortable choice at a time until they couldn't find their way back. Huxley in 1931, Miyazaki in 2001, different cultures, different centuries, different mediums, but the same warning. And it's a different warning to the one most of us grew up with. Orwell, in 1984, warned us about a world that controls us through fear. Huxley warned us about a world that controls us through comfort. We build systems to watch out for Big Brother, authoritarianism, the erosion of rights. We have language for that, frameworks for that. We know what to resist. But nobody built a system to watch for Soma. Nobody put up a warning sign that said, careful, this might feel really good. This might feel really comfortable. And that's exactly the problem. The elements of both dystopias are already here whether we like it or not. So the question I want to leave you with is whether we have the discipline and capacity to persevere, whether we still have the patience to sit with something difficult, whether we still believe that the struggle, the grief, the complexity, the inconvenient truth is worth something. Huxley didn't write about a future being destroyed. He wrote about one being given away, willingly, unknowingly, one distraction at a time. And that the parts of us that feel things, that struggle, that grieve, that wonder, that search for meaning, those parts are worth protecting. Thank you for sitting with these ideas today. Progress Reimagined exists for exactly this kind of conversation, exploring ideas and innovations that put humanity and our planet first. If this episode made you think, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe. And if you haven't read Brave New World, Amusing Ourselves to Death, or 1984, start there. Sit with them. They were written decades apart, in different contexts, by different people, but they're asking the same question we've been asking today. I have a promo link for Libro.fm in the show notes, an audio platform that supports independent bookstores. A good place to start if you prefer listening. Thank you.